So welcome back to the Let's Talk Europe episode, and today we have our special guest, a monthly guest, maybe sometimes a bit less frequent than a month, but anyway, straight from Ukraine, army captain. Last time I said major, but we'll ask maybe already a major. The last time Victor was a captain, so Victor Tregubov. Hello, Victor.
Hello.
So how is your rank? Because one of our, common friends said, "Oh, he's climbing up the ranks," and I said, "Yeah, he is." And then you said no. So yeah.
Captain. For now, it's captain.
Okay, so let's maybe start because we already delayed this recording a few times, and it's due to lack of electricity. So how bad is it in the part of Ukraine that you are based with the electricity?
Well, in my part, in the last week, it's pretty bad because it's Zhytomyr region. It was hit really hard during the last shelling, and the energy distribution facilities was actually pretty damaged. Russians try to hit not the energy generators mostly, but energy transformators and distribution network. And it's because it's even harder to repair. If you can repair generation facilities, it's harder to repair transformators because every one of them is some kind of specific work. Every one of them needs to be created and developed separately for each station, and that's something you cannot fix in a few days. So for now, in our region, it's maybe blackouts for maybe 5 or more hours a day, mostly. It's not such a big problem as to being without electricity, but it's much more problematic to be without heating. Because for now in Ukraine it's already snowing, and without heating it's could create some kind of problems, as well as without water supply. For me, I can, well, when I am now living in small town, but working on my base. So on my base, that's not a problem. There are generators there. But when I come home, when I come to my flat apartments I'm using now, it's problematic. Yes, because it's cold and it's it's hard to work having only your phone and maybe sometimes your notebook. I tried to buy energy accumulation station, well, small compact one, and it's helping. I use it only for a few hours now. It helping. Yeah. At least I got my lamp. At least I got my notebook. But still, it's it's, I'd say, just unpleasant. Of course, that's not such a big deal because many of people are for now are in trenches, and it's much worse in trenches. Trust me, I was there. But for now, it's more, I say, difficult for civilian populations than for military. Military have their own generators, military have their own assets, and military is priority one in power supply in Ukraine now. But for civilian population, for the people in their houses, that's sometimes critical. And we have only a few days of snow. I suppose that in January it could be worse.
So as I understand, you don't have a stove and some wood, to heat up the flat.
Oh, well, for now, no. For now, no. Ukraine is not really so-called of a country. You can always, I don't know, to dress into some kind of park in your own home. It's uncomfortable, but it's manageable. But of course, it's still not the living you want for everyone, because people have kids, people have pets, people have some sick relatives who you cannot actually keep in that regime for all the time. So yeah, that could be problematic in some cases.
Okay, so since we started talking about the winter, probably there are a lot of concerns when you read Twitter. What's going to happen in the winter? So, for you as a professional, how do you see this winter season? Because like there are some like reports that of course there is a the Ukraine has this momentum at the moment, but how is it dealing with this element of cold and snow? Will it stop the progresses? How do you see it during the winter?
If we are talking about military advances, that's
yeah,
not
military, of course.
First of all, military has their own assets and their own energy generators. And secondary, in some cases, it's even easier because, for example, for armored vehicles, for tanks, the snow is better than mud. So if during autumn you have that kind of muddy roads, that kind of swamp all over their land, it's problematic, yes. In winter months, it's not so bad. Of course, it's still worse than in summer, but it's not so bad. It could be used. So I don't think actually that we will have some kind of winter stalemate or winter, I don't know, some kind of hiatus or whatever. No, it's not gonna work that way. I suppose the war will continue, maybe with, of course, with some changes in several aspects, maybe some changes in use of aviation, maybe some, I don't know, changes in use of light infantry, but still that's not such kind of problem and not such kind of big deal. As far I could remind you that the Baltsevo battle was actually during the winter, it was during February, and Avdiivka battle in the year 2016 was also in a really cold February, March. I was there during the moment. Yeah, it was cold, but it still was bearable, and that's not some kind of problem you can't bear during the war. So it's not a big deal. We are not in Finland. We are not in winter war. So I suppose both our army and Russian army can fight during that circumstances.
Yeah, so I read today two conflicting statements. One is by the Ukrainian politicians, probably, the defense minister, that said that they will be in Crimea by the end of December. And then, there is General Milley from the U.S., staff command. He says that with the current weapon, supply and stuff like that, there is no chance that Ukrainians retake the territory. So how do you see it, like from, this smaller scale? Is it possible to do during the winter, the full recovery to the 2014, or of course that's too optimistic?
2014, maybe not. But the irony is we are closer, from my perspective, we are closer to enter to Crimea than to maybe take in Donetsk. Because we already took Kherson, we already have some ground on the right bank. It's still not really stable, but it is. So theoretically, if we could do something to take the right left bank of Dnipro, eastern bank of Dnipro, and to retake Kherson Oblast a wall, well, it's practically the gates of Crimea. But still, there is a big difference between entering Crimea and taking Sevastopol. That's not the same, actually. I suppose that maybe if we will get lucky in the remaining occupied part of Kherson Oblast, we can actually, technically from a military perspective, make an entry in northern Crimea. That's possible. For our special operation forces, maybe not on full scale, but maybe for special operation forces group, it's possible, like they already did on Kinburn Peninsula. So it's not so far as it seems. It's even closer than coming in Donetsk. Donetsk is much closer, but it's so
it's fortified. You mean this Donbas region, yeah? So
and you can actually, you can have nothing to fortify in Kherson Oblast or in northern Crimea. That's just plain steppe. basically, I was raised in northern Crimea, so it's flat as the butt of a child. So,
so you mentioned Sevastopol. So what is the difference in the case there? Is it different terrain there, or fortification, or what? That you said it's not so easy to access. You know this.
I have no map, so I'll be frank. Crimea consists from three different parts. First part is steppe part, that's the most of Crimea, all northern Crimea, along central Crimea. Then mountains, mountain range, and then south of Crimea, so-called south shore of Crimea. So it's easy to maybe in some cases to enter the steppe part, but to go through the mountains on the south part, it's of course much harder. Not even because of some fortified areas, but because of mountains. It's always easier.
Natural obstacles, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ukrainian army, truth to be told, have absolutely no experience in mountain warfare for now. Well, we have no situation. Well, maybe just during Soviet times in Afghanistan, that was some kind of last time any Ukrainian fight in the mountains. So,
well, you know, Ukrainians are very quick to learn, because like a few months ago, we heard that the Ukraine has no offensive war, you know, experience. And look, it looks like successful. Okay, so in terms of, you know, this Kherson, what is still occupied, what are the main obstacles of retaking? Is it the amount of Russian military there? Is it the lack of, you know, weapons, or, you know, the infrastructure? What is the biggest problem?
Well, first of all, it's a rather big river that's hard to cross. And that was our advantage, and now there is their advantage. And, well, I suppose that's the number of Russian troops stationed in Kherson Oblast and in Zaporizhia Oblast. Of course, they took everything they could from the right bank to the left bank, and now much of those troops are there, and you have to do something to combat it. Of course, it's still a hard time for them, because first of all, they are not really prepared to winter warfare, maybe even worse than we. And secondary, because the ground there is flat, no big cities, no natural obstacles to hide. So it could be, tricky for them too, because we use artillery and missiles of longer range, and we can actually fight them even across the river. So yeah, that's not something easy for them, and that's why they evacuated even airfield of Chaplinka. That's actually almost on the border of Crimea with Kherson Oblast, because we still can hit that with HIMARSs, and we still actually can hit everything, even some targets in northern Crimea. But maybe the most northern one. So it's problematic for them, but it doesn't mean that the offense there could be easy for us. No. I suppose that maybe the next step for us will be not the right bank in Kherson Oblast, but the eastern part of Luhansk Oblast. But I'm not the one to know. It's the question for our general staff.
Okay, so the small question, is the river gonna be, you know, frozen? Like, will it have ice that you are able to use, or it's just a thin ice, or is no ice in terms of, you know, crossing the river? Because we know that most of the bridges are blown up.
A long story short, I suppose not. Dnipro in Kherson region could get really thick ice, well, maybe once in 12 years or so. So it's possible only in case the winter will be really harsh. And if the winter will be really harsh, it will be also not really good for us, but for civilian population, because of energy problems. So I don't suppose Dnipro can be frozen in, I don't know, in Kiev. That's for sure. That's not a problem. But Kherson is much closer to the south, and climate there are actually much warmer.
So since you mentioned this, the population a few times, so how bad is it in Ukraine in terms of, you know, the shortage of fuel and electricity and heating just to get, the sense, because like probably not many in Europe understand what it is, like the current situation. Like we hear that 40%, 50% is, affected. What is the data that you know from, Ukrainian sources?
Well, that's not really hard to imagine. Imagine for now that 5 hours a day, maybe in the middle of a day, maybe from, I suppose, from 4 to 10 or whatever, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever, you have no electricity, no heating, and no water flow, no water supply. Well, just imagine how you will live in your flat during that, and that's something you can imagine and understand. That's bearable for most, but that's really far from comfort. No, you can imagine Ukrainian climate plus minus, and Ukraine is not Greece. It's, of course, it's not Lithuania, and it's not Finland, but it's not Greece also. So for now, the temperature beyond my window is maybe -2 Celsius or whatever, and there is a good snow. So yeah, that's some kind of problem.
Okay, so since you are an army person, let us know what is the situation with the weaponry, like because also we look at those packages, from Rammstein, and we don't see ATACMS, we don't see, additional HIMARS. We see that, there is like a weaponry for the defense, to fight those incoming rockets. But what is the general situation like in terms of weapons for retaking occupied territories? How do you see it?
I suppose the closer we get to Crimea, the more cautious became United States leadership about giving us some kind of long-range weapons. Maybe so. But yes, we have that problem. And also we have some problems for now with our artillery we took from Europe. It actually needs repair, and not always repair is possible. For example, in the last few days, I heard about problems with Paysera 2000 German.
It's not the first time you mentioned this, so.
But in that particular case, it's not a problem with them. Actually, they just got wearing. Ukrainians use it really hard, and any artillery piece actually needs a repair after heavy use. That's not about bad machines or something. No, that just heavy use that after which you need absolutely constant, absolutely normal repair. And but the problem is for now, I suppose even Bundeswehr have no opportunity to repair it so fast. And that actually raises a question about NATO capability to defend itself, because as we can see, the best German weapons, they are good. No, they are really good for now. We use them really effectively, but they are not used to prolonged war. Not even the weapons itself, but maybe the Germany defense production, defense industry isn't ready to repair it during the, more or less the long conflict that actually wages more than for several months.
Okay, so in terms of like retaking territories, how important is the tanks? Is there enough, like aviation? We heard lots of, training of the pilots and stuff like that, but in US, but still there are no Western planes and no Western tanks. What kind of situation in your eyes in terms of this weaponry?
Well, for now, the most effective in that war and the most crucial weapons of this war is, first of all, artillery and artillery, drones, anti-drone systems, and long-range missiles. And yes, of course, we're in constant lag because, of course, we always need more. But that's a game changer here. How actually many artillery systems do you have? And how many artillery system your enemy has. So yes, that's never enough. Before victory, it would be never enough. We always will want more, and we always will want something long range. Just because most of Russian assets actually are destroyed on the spot, not in the actually some kind of close quarter combat, but on the spot, on airfields, on bases, on supply depots, and so on. That's the nature of this war. And that's why the first thing we need is this kind of weapons. However, of course, tanks are also always needed. Any weapons for now is needed, and even winter clothes are needed for now. So, well, that's well, on the war you rarely have enough. You rarely have enough ammunition on yourself. You rarely have enough medical supplies on yourself. You always want more, and more is always actually gives you an edge and advantage. So yeah.
Yeah, you're very diplomatic today, to be honest. So, like in one of the podcast streams of the person that you don't really like too much, but most of Lithuanians watch, Aristovich said that you would be surprised how little we got in terms of ammo for HIMARS. So, like, do you think that at the current situation, current time and date, there is enough ammo for the HIMARS to actually do the damage that is needed?
I suppose not. I suppose not, because I don't know the specifics, but I can see how often we use HIMARSes. It's not so often as we could and as we actually need. So yeah, I suppose there is a problem with that. We are good in using it. For now, we are effective in using it for now, and Russians is not really effective in countering them, so that's a game changer. And yes, we have a good weapon, but we have no infinite ammo in that game. Yeah.
So if we understand correctly, since the HIMARSes arrived in Ukraine, none of the batteries were damaged. Like,
as far as I know, none of the batteries were destroyed. I don't know about damaged. I suppose not. I suppose not. But Russians, of course.
Well, they claim that they destroyed it like a few times, everything. But yeah,
absolutely. Like Ukrainians tanks and Ukrainians aviations, Russians already claim to destroy much more than we all had in it during any moment. But still, as far as I know, no, HIMARS are safe because, first of all, they are used from really long distances, and secondly, because Ukraine has a specific tactics of using them. They are actually they get their ammunition stashed on some specific places. They just come onto this place, ammunition get into them, and they fire and they move back. So the delay between fire and moving back is absolutely minimal. And that's what makes them, if not impenetrable, but really hard to hit for any Russian counteroffensive, because they just fire and get and hit and run in maybe in minutes. So that's really hard to counter.
I see. So what is the situation in terms of, manpower, mobilization? Because we hear, on the Russian side, what they are achieving or not achieving. We hear the thing that the second wave is probably going to be even worse for them. What is the situation in terms of Ukraine, with the conscripts and the mobilization?
If we're talking about manpower, as far as I know, it's not bad. I don't know about any kind of critical shortage. I don't know about any kind of, oh my God, we have no people to do something. And after Russians actually fled from Kherson, we got several brigades with good combat experience to use on other directions. So that's good. So if we're talking about,
they were freed from the battles in Kherson, yeah?
Yeah. If we are talking about experienced soldiers, we have an advantage. That's definitely so, because for Russians began their full mobilization, and for now the effectiveness of mobilized persons there is really low. That's a common knowledge for now. They are really not effective. They don't want to fight, and they don't really know how. In Ukraine, we still have more, maybe we have not such numbers in our shield populations, but if we are talking about people with some kind of combat experience, or at least with some kind of effective army training, we have more.
Well, this is good to hear always. So I have to ask, of course, you how this incident in Poland is like portrayed in Ukraine, because I follow the U.S. News, so there's lots of crap there for sure, and especially among Trump supporters, we hear nonsenses. What is the we know that the official statement from the Polish and U.S. sources were that it's a Ukrainian air defense missile that targeted, the incoming rocket and missed. But also we hear that there were reported of 2 rockets, but only 1 was shown in Poland. So is there a conversation in the press? Do you know anything from military sources? Like what was the case in terms of that?
I don't know. The only thing we don't know for now is that the first it was announced that rockets were 2, and after last reports that was 1. Judging from the debris, it was C-300 rocket, and if it was C-300, it could be only Ukrainian, sadly. Well, really sadly, but they're just, if it was used of course, Russians sometimes use S-300 rockets to hit ground targets. It's possible, but the distance they can cross to hit this kind of targets is like, maybe 40 kilometers at best. Russians just cannot, even from the Belarusian borders, this place is like 100 kilometers or so. So if that's really this type of rocket, it could be only Ukrainian, sadly. But we still don't know about second rocket, was it or not. And for us, I'd suppose that for us, even the reaction of our persons in charge, I suppose was a little dissatisfying. Because when Zelensky told it could be Ukrainians, absolutely, that was sounded really offensive for Poles. Because nobody actually accused Ukraine, even if it really was Ukrainian rocket. It's absolutely normal. If you drive a car and some I don't know, idiot goes in your way and you like and got into other cars, that's not your fault. That's the fault of this idiot. And if some country attacks your country and you defended yourself and some missile go astray, that's normal. That's war. That's nothing to blame Ukrainian forces about. But from my perspective, Ukrainian officials and authorities should react not in complete denial, like, oh, it couldn't be us, but it could be us, and we need to talk about that. That's not our fault, but that's still our responsibility.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, because it looked a bit strange, but of course, the war and the emotion and everything is understandable. So the last thing maybe I want to ask you is, we know that some of the partners, of Ukraine in Europe are strange, and I'm talking always about Viktor Orban. And how do you see this behavior of the neighbor? How likely that the one country can sabotage, the whole thing, and the supplies, the aid, the financial aid, maybe is not gonna, end up in Ukraine. How to deal with such a neighbor who is talking about borders, and stuff like that? Are there any jokes in Ukraine about taking over, Hungary or parts of Hungary?
No, I actually joked that we just should make an agreement that let Ukraine in English sound like Hungary. And there will be no problem at all. Hungary will be part of EU and NATO, while the country of Magyarország will do anything this country wants. But the problem is that actually for now Orban is acting like a Russian proxy, and it's not really, he is not really trying to hide that, and that's bad, and that's bad not only for Ukraine. Well, we can manage that. It's bad for NATO and EU. It's a question about do NATO and EU actually want to have a Russian proxy that can have blocking voice in their own home. That's a question, but that's a question not for me, but for the citizens and politicians of those countries. But for now, we have what we have, and Orban is really actually, behaving like Putin's puppy. That's sad but true.
Okay, Victor. So I'm not gonna use, your electricity because you never know when it's gonna stop today, and you might still need the battery. So, as usual, it's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to have the info straight from a person who is like not on the sofa, as in our case, but on the sofa next to the scene in terms of really what's happening. So. Hopefully we can do the next episode sooner and without electricity shortage. So thanks everyone who are watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next episode.